They did not expect fear to be the first emotion, but it was, sharp and immediate, spreading through the observation chamber when the final archive unlocked. The Alien Council had studied thousands of species, cataloged their wars, their myths, their extinctions, yet nothing had prepared them for what human history revealed in its raw, unfiltered form. At first it looked familiar, almost dull, a primitive world divided by borders, arguing over land and belief, killing each other with inefficient weapons. But then the pattern emerged, subtle and undeniable, and the room went silent as realization settled like a predator in the dark. The Kareth archivist paused the playback not because the system demanded it, but because its own cognition stuttered. Humans did not evolve as conquerors or philosophers or builders of empires, at least not at first. They evolved as survivors, hunted, cornered, starved, and betrayed by their own kind. Every age, every century, every recorded decade carried the same signature, a cycle of collapse followed by adaptation, followed by something worse. The Council had assumed this was weakness. They were wrong. As the archives scrolled deeper, wars multiplied, not just in number, but in complexity. Humans learned faster under pressure. When faced with annihilation, they did not pray for mercy or wait for extinction. They changed. They took whatever tools were available and twisted them into weapons, strategies, ideologies. Even their failures were instructive. Every loss became a lesson burned into collective memory. The alien analysts exchanged uneasy glances, a rare thing among species trained to suppress emotional leakage, because this was not how most civilizations behaved. Most learned to avoid pain. Humans learned to weaponize it. The Council had ordered this study after first contact protocols flagged humanity as an anomaly. On paper, they were unimpressive. No unified planetary government, constant internal conflict, technology advancing unevenly, morality inconsistent to the point of contradiction. A species like that should have destroyed itself long before reaching the stars. Yet here they were, broadcasting into the void, not with threats or boasts, but with stories, music, records of suffering openly shared. That alone had raised concern. Species that survived usually erased their shame. Humans archived it. The projection shifted to an era marked by total war, cities reduced to ash, millions dead in spans of time too short to comprehend. The Council expected despair. Instead, they saw production curves rise, scientific breakthroughs accelerate, populations mobilize with terrifying efficiency. Entire societies restructured themselves not for comfort, but for endurance. Children were taught to ration. Artists documented destruction instead of hiding from it. Scientists worked knowing their discoveries could end the world, and still they continued. The archivist slowed the playback again, tracing a familiar yet disturbing through line. Humanity only reached its most unified state when extinction was close enough to taste. An elder counselor broke silence, voice low, strained, asking the question none of them wanted to articulate. What happens when a species like this finds an enemy that is not itself? The question lingered unanswered as the archive moved forward, into the digital age, into weapons that could erase continents, into doctrines built on mutual destruction as a form of peace. The Council had seen deterrence before. This was different. Humans accepted annihilation as a cost of survival. They stared into the abyss and calmly designed systems that assumed they would fall, just to make sure the enemy fell with them. The more data they consumed, the less they spoke. Revolutions sparked by ideas instead of armies, empires collapsing under the weight of information, humans turning their own governments upside down when trust broke, again and again without collapsing permanently. There was no final breaking point, no clean extinction event, just constant stress, constant reinvention. The analysts flagged a psychological trait that appeared repeatedly across cultures and centuries. When pushed beyond endurance, humans did not surrender. They escalated in unpredictable directions. Somewhere in the archive, the tone shifted. Humanity reached space not with triumph, but exhaustion. Their first steps beyond their world were cautious, scarred by memory, guided by fear of repeating past mistakes. The council almost relaxed then, sensing restraint, maturity. That relief lasted exactly 47 standard seconds, because the next data cluster revealed contingency plans, not defenses, not exploration protocols, but fail-safes designed to ensure that if humanity fell, it would not fall alone. Automated systems seeded across their solar system, dormant weapons tied to extinction-level triggers, last resort answers to questions no one had asked them yet. The archivist flagged the section as unprecedented. No species had ever prepared vengeance beyond death itself. It was considered irrational. Humanity considered it responsible. A junior analyst attempted to argue that these were theoretical, political posturing, plans never meant to activate. The historical overlay silenced them. Humans had activated worse before, repeatedly. Every time they said never again, they meant never again without being ready. As the council processed this, subtle unease crept through the chamber, not panic, not fear in its pure form, but something colder, respect edged with dread, the kind reserved for forces of nature that could not be reasoned with once unleashed. The projection displayed early extrasolar probes carrying messages of peace, art, and history. On the surface, it looked innocent, hopeful. Embedded beneath were encrypted layers, warnings encoded in mathematics and probability, a quiet statement to the universe: we know who we are. Do not make us prove it. For the first time in recorded council history, a session was flagged as psychologically hazardous. Observers reported elevated stress responses across multiple species. The study was supposed to determine threat level, diplomatic posture, possible integration. Instead, it exposed a flaw in the council's assumptions. They believed intelligence led to caution, power led to arrogance, suffering led to collapse. Humanity inverted every expectation. Suffering led to focus, intelligence led to contingency, power led to self-restraint barely held in check. Near the end of the first compilation cycle, an unauthorized human transmission appeared, intercepted long after it was sent, drifting through interstellar space like a ghost. It was not addressed to any species in particular. It was a record, a warning disguised as a story, a voice, calm, tired, unmistakably human, explaining that history was not a list of victories, but a catalog of mistakes paid for in blood, and that survival did not mean innocence. The council replayed it twice, then again. One counselor finally spoke the thought all of them now shared. If this species ever decides that the galaxy itself is a threat, there will be no negotiation phase. The archivist closed the file, designation updated from developing civilization to latent extinction class actor. Outside the chamber, fleets moved, policies shifted, observers were recalled. Humanity was still unaware it had been reclassified. That ignorance was the most dangerous variable of all. And buried deep within the archive, in a section the council had not yet reached, waited the record of what humans did the first time someone tried to erase them from the stars.
The first attempt to erase humanity did not begin with weapons, but with silence, and that was how the council nearly missed it. Trade signals that once bounced casually between human colonies stopped returning. Navigation beacons went dark one by one, not explosively, but cleanly, as if someone had reached into space and simply turned them off. At first, the council categorized it as internal failure, a young species stumbling through early expansion. Then a single human courier ship limped into neutral space, hull scorched, systems failing, broadcasting on every frequency at once like a scream stretched across the void. The recording from that ship became mandatory viewing within hours. The human voice was hoarse, steady only by discipline, explaining that entire settlements had vanished without debris fields, without radiation spikes, without survivors. Worlds emptied as if life itself had been selectively deleted. The attackers did not announce themselves. They did not claim territory. They targeted infrastructure, memory, continuity. It was extermination conducted with surgical patience. The Council recognized the signature immediately. The Varelian Compact had done this before, quietly removing emerging competitors long before they could become inconvenient. What stunned the observers was not that humanity was under attack, but that it took humans less than 3 standard days to realize it was happening. Their networks lit up with internal alerts, civilian channels flooded with controlled information releases, not panic. Evacuation protocols initiated alongside mobilization orders. There was no global vote, no philosophical debate. Every fractured government, every rival power, every ideological enemy aligned without negotiation. The message was simple and repeated everywhere. We are being hunted. Act accordingly. The Council expected desperate defenses, pleas for intervention, appeals to law. None came. Instead, human vessels began doing something that made no tactical sense at first glance. They retreated inward, abandoning outer colonies with ruthless efficiency. Entire populations were moved, or in some cases left behind with sealed archives and autonomous systems activated. Analysts argued among themselves until the pattern clicked. Humanity was not retreating, it was compressing, pulling itself into a tighter, denser configuration where response times shortened and coordination became absolute. As Varelian strike units swept through abandoned systems expecting pursuit, they found traps, not mines, not ambush fleets, but data. Human probes seeded false trails, broadcasting exaggerated weakness, fragmented command structures, simulated panic. Varelian doctrine thrived on predictability. Humans fed it lies crafted from their own history, recreating patterns of collapse that had never actually led to extinction. The Compact advanced confidently, convinced the species was breaking under pressure. That confidence lasted until the first Varelian command node disappeared. The destruction was not spectacular, no massive explosions, no dramatic last stands. A Varelian core station simply ceased to exist, replaced by a region of space-time that behaved incorrectly. Sensors reported contradictions, mass without matter, energy without source. The Council's physicists replayed the data in disbelief. Humanity had weaponized experimental theories the rest of the galaxy considered too unstable to pursue. They had not perfected them, they had accepted the risk. The human response escalated unevenly, deliberately. Some Varelian fleets were annihilated without warning, others were allowed to withdraw untouched. The inconsistency drove the Compact into strategic confusion. Humans were not seeking victory in the conventional sense. They were studying their enemy in real time, adjusting tactics after each encounter, improving lethality with terrifying speed. Losses that would have crippled other civilizations were absorbed and repurposed. Human factories retooled mid-conflict, civilian industries converted overnight. Entertainment channels went silent, replaced by public briefings that framed the war not as heroism, but as obligation. Within the council chamber, unease deepened into alarm. Observers noted the language humans used internally. There was no talk of revenge, no grand speeches about destiny, only phrases like necessary, containment, and end state. A junior counselor asked whether humanity could be reasoned with now, before the conflict escalated further. The question was logged and ignored, because the data showed something worse. Humanity had already calculated the cost of restraint and found it unacceptable. As weeks passed, the war spread invisibly. Human cyber units infiltrated Varelian command networks using adaptive code that rewrote itself faster than countermeasures could respond. Entire fleets received orders that appeared legitimate, redirecting them into dead zones where they were quietly dismantled. Varelian leaders attempted negotiation at last, transmitting offers of ceasefire, resource concessions, even a formal apology. Humanity did not respond, not because they did not hear, but because they had already moved past the phase where words mattered. the Council intercepted a human internal broadcast meant only for their own species. It was not dramatic. A calm voice reminded listeners that survival had never been guaranteed, that history had taught them mercy without strength was an invitation to extinction. The voice encouraged citizens to document their thoughts, their fears, their reasons for fighting, not for propaganda, but for the record, so that if humanity failed, the universe would at least know why. The Council recognized the subtext immediately. This was not a rallying cry, it was a farewell plan. Then came the moment that forced an emergency session. Humanity deployed a weapon that did not target ships or planets, but supply logic itself. Varelian manufacturing hubs found their replication systems producing useless components, materials subtly altered at the atomic level to fail only after assembly. Entire war economies collapsed under their own weight. The Compact accused humanity of violating every known convention of war. Humanity responded once, with a single transmission. You tried to erase us quietly. We learned. Within months, the Varelian Compact fractured. Member species defected, systems declared neutrality, leadership vanished. The Council prepared to intervene, to impose peace, to stop the spiral before it reached a point of no return. Before any vote could be held, humanity acted again. They released the archives. Not propaganda, not threats, but raw footage, data logs, survivor accounts of erased colonies. They sent it everywhere, to allies, to enemies, to neutral observers, to anyone who would listen. The effect was immediate and irreversible. Species that had never known existential fear felt it for the first time. Public opinion across the galaxy shifted overnight. Empires distanced themselves from the Compact. Trade routes closed. Diplomatic ties snapped. Humanity had not just fought a war, they had rewritten the narrative of it, framing themselves not as conquerors, but as a case study in consequences. The Council noted a disturbing efficiency in how humans leveraged empathy as a strategic weapon. As the final Varelian stronghold fell, humanity stopped. They did not pursue fleeing remnants, they did not annex territory. They sealed the region behind automated exclusion zones and issued a warning that required no repetition. Enter and be treated as a continuation of the threat. The war was over by every measurable standard. Humanity had survived. The Council expected relief. What they observed instead was preparation. Human military production did not slow. Research funding increased, doctrines updated. Children born during the conflict were taught its lessons without glorification. The Council finally understood the most terrifying pattern of all. Humanity did not view this war as an anomaly. It was a rehearsal. As the session ended, an encrypted data packet surfaced, flagged as priority red. It originated from deep within human space, time-stamped years before the war began. The subject line translated imperfectly, but the meaning was clear. If first contact fails. The Council authorized immediate decryption. Whatever humanity had prepared next was something they had never intended anyone to see.
The decrypted packet did not open like a weapons schematic or a battle plan, and that alone unsettled the Council more than any superweapon ever could. It opened as a historical index, a branching map of human decisions stretching backward and forward through probability space, each node labeled not with dates, but with conditions. If invasion detected, if extinction probability exceeds threshold, if diplomacy compromised, if silence persists beyond acceptable variance. Humanity had not prepared for a single enemy. They had prepared for inevitability. As the Council absorbed the structure, something uncomfortable became clear. This was not a response framework built in fear, it was built in resignation. The language lacked anger, lacked urgency. It read like a species that had already accepted the universe was hostile and simply adjusted its behavior accordingly. One counselor murmured that it resembled a will rather than a plan.
Another corrected them. It was a legacy protocol designed to function even if no humans remained to remember why it existed. Buried within the packet was a segment marked Public Release on Failure. It contained cultural records, art, personal messages, and something unexpected, a direct address to whoever found it. The voice was human, calm, familiar in tone, the kind used in documentaries meant to be watched late at night. It explained that humanity did not believe itself special or chosen. It believed it was dangerous when cornered, and that pretending otherwise would be irresponsible. The voice invited the listener to learn from human mistakes rather than repeat them. The council found this framing deeply unsettling because it implied that everything humanity had done so far was restraint. While the council debated classification changes, events in the wider galaxy accelerated beyond prediction. The collapse of the Virillion Compact created a power vacuum that drew attention like blood in water. Smaller empires maneuvered to claim abandoned systems. Pirate coalitions surged. Ideological blocs argued over intervention and containment. Through it all, humanity remained silent. No statements, no threats, no diplomatic tours. Their borders closed, trade routes narrowed, and observation posts detected massive internal movement. Fleets repositioned not outward, but inward, clustering around population centers and critical infrastructure. Humanity was fortifying something. A council observer assigned to long-term human monitoring flagged a pattern that triggered an immediate alert. Human media, long chaotic and divisive, had synchronized, not in content, but in tone. Stories focused on memory, on past errors, on quiet resilience. There were no victory parades, no triumphal rhetoric. Instead, narratives emphasized vigilance and responsibility. Subtle messages encouraged viewers to stay informed, to question easy answers, to remember that survival had a cost. It was a strange form of messaging, almost like a reminder slipped gently into the mind. Subscribe to awareness, stay watching. History rewards those who pay attention. The council realized too late that even human entertainment was part of their strategic ecosystem. Then came the anomaly. In a neutral system far from human space, an array activation detected a distortion identical to the one that had erased the Virillion command node. Only this time, it was smaller, contained, and stable. Humanity had solved the problem they once accepted as risky. They had learned how to break reality without breaking themselves. The data suggested this was not a weapon test, but a demonstration, carefully positioned so that it would be seen. Humanity was communicating again, not with words, but with capability. The council convened an emergency summit with representatives from every major power. The agenda was singular: decide how to approach humanity before escalation became irreversible. Opinions fractured immediately. Some argued for preemptive containment, citing the extinction class designation. Others warned that any show of force would validate humanity's worst assumptions. A third faction suggested alliance, proposing that humanity's methods, while extreme, could be directed against shared threats. That proposal died quietly when analysts projected the long-term implications. A species that weaponized its own history would never accept oversight. As the debates dragged on, a human envoy appeared without announcement. Not a fleet, not a delegation, a single ship, unarmed by standard metrics, broadcasting an open channel request. The council chamber fell silent as the connection stabilized. The human representative did not threaten or plead. They spoke plainly, stating that humanity was aware of the council's deliberations, not through espionage, but because human models predicted them. The envoy explained that humanity did not seek dominance or isolation. It sought certainty, the certainty that it would not be erased quietly again. When asked what humanity wanted, the answer was simple and chilling: distance, transparency, and time.
The envoy suggested that if other civilizations truly wished for peace, they would respect boundaries and observe rather than interfere. Humanity would do the same. The council pressed for guarantees. The humans smiled faintly and replied that guarantees were a luxury history had taught them not to trust. They offered instead a warning, delivered without menace. If forced to choose between coexistence and survival, humanity would choose survival every time, and it would not apologize for what followed. The transmission ended without ceremony. No ultimatum, no deadline. Just a quiet certainty that hung in the chamber long after the signal cut. Some counselors felt relief, others felt dread, because beneath the calm words lay an unspoken implication. Humanity had already mapped every likely outcome of this moment. Whatever the council decided next would not surprise them. As the summit adjourned, a final data stream arrived from a deep space probe positioned beyond known trade routes. It carried a human marker, old, pre-contact era. The probe had encountered something ancient, massive, and moving toward the galactic core. Humanity had logged it, modeled it, and classified it as inevitable. They had not warned anyone, until now. The attached note was brief and devastating. This is why we prepared.
The object moving toward the galactic core had no name because it predated language as the Council understood it. Humanity called it the Quiet, not because it was peaceful, but because it left nothing behind that could speak. The data packet humanity released was exhaustive, cold, and terrifyingly clear. Star systems dimmed without supernova signatures. Civilizations vanished without debris or distress calls. Even automated relics stopped transmitting, as if reality itself had been edited. The Quiet did not conquer, it removed. The Council's first instinct was disbelief, followed by denial, then panic carefully masked as procedure. Ancient threats were the stuff of legend, not policy. Yet the human models were precise, built on centuries of studying collapse, extinction, and systemic failure. They had tracked anomalies across deep time, stitched together from myth, gravitational scars, and statistical absences. Humanity had not discovered the Quiet, they had inferred it, the way one infers a predator by the sudden silence of prey. What unsettled the Council most was the timestamp. Humanity had identified the pattern before first contact, before the Virelian War, before they were even certain they would survive long enough to matter. The legacy protocols, the extinction contingencies, the willingness to escalate beyond convention, all of it traced back to this single conclusion. The universe was not empty, it was selectively quiet. Humanity had grown up hearing that silence and decided never to trust it. As the Council cross-referenced the data with their own archives, matches began to appear. Lost empires written off as internal collapse, regions of space avoided out of superstition, gaps in historical continuity no one had wanted to examine too closely. The Quiet had passed near them before, it was passing again, and this time it was accelerating. Humanity's proposal arrived without fanfare. They did not demand command, they did not claim to have a solution, they offered a framework. Observe, share data, prepare for the possibility that deterrence, as understood by the galaxy, did not apply. The Quiet did not negotiate, it did not adapt, it simply advanced. Humanity's models suggested only two viable responses: total concealment or total confrontation. Both carried extinction-level risk. Humanity had been preparing for both. Some counselors balked at the implication. Confrontation meant weaponizing reality at a scale never attempted. Concealment meant sacrificing entire regions of space to create blind zones. The ethical implications alone paralyzed debate. Humanity's response to those concerns was characteristically blunt. Ethics are for futures that exist. Survival comes first. The statement ignited outrage, but it also resonated with an uncomfortable truth the Council had spent millennia avoiding.
Joint observation arrays were established reluctantly. What they revealed shattered any remaining illusions. The quiet was not a fleet or a singular entity, but a distributed phenomenon, a cascading failure in the fabric of space-time, triggered by unknown intelligence. It erased complexity, leaving behind simplified, stable emptiness. To the quiet, civilizations were noise. Humanity's scientists described it as a cosmic immune response, the galaxy correcting itself. As panic spread through allied and neutral systems alike, humanity did something unexpected. They opened their archives fully, not curated highlights, but everything. Wars, atrocities, failures, near extinctions. The message was implicit. This is what we are capable of, for better or worse. Decide if you want us beside you when the quiet arrives. The Council realized this was not manipulation, it was consent. Humanity was giving the galaxy a chance to opt in or step away. Public reaction across the stars was chaotic. Some worlds called for immediate alliance, others demanded humanity be restrained, fearing that their methods would doom everyone faster than the quiet ever could. Protests erupted, governments fell. The familiar pattern repeated on a galactic scale. Crisis did not unify, it clarified. Humanity watched, waited, and prepared regardless of the outcome. Deep within human space, acceleration became beyond anything observers had recorded. Structures assembled that defied known engineering limits. Energy output spiked to levels previously associated only with stellar phenomena. Yet there were no declarations, no visible countdowns. Humanity treated the coming threat the way it treated history itself, as a lesson already learned. The Council finally voted to formalize cooperation, narrowly passing a resolution that authorized shared command structures in the event of contact with the quiet. Humanity accepted, with a caveat that chilled every species present. Shared command would exist only until the first existential threshold was crossed. After that, humanity would act independently. The Council protested. Humanity did not argue. They simply stated that history suggested centralized hesitation was more lethal than unilateral action. As the quiet crossed a boundary humanity had marked as the point of no return, long-range sensors captured something new. It slowed. For the first time in its recorded movement, the phenomenon adjusted its trajectory slightly. Human analysts went silent. The Council leaned in. Whatever the quiet was, it had noticed something. It had noticed humanity. A human internal transmission leaked into the shared network, likely intentionally. A familiar voice spoke, not to rally, but to remind. We were never the strongest. We were never the wisest. We survived because when the universe showed us what it was, we believed it. The feed cut as emergency alerts cascaded across every allied system. The quiet was no longer just approaching, it was responding.
The moment the quiet responded, humanity abandoned any remaining pretense of uncertainty. Protocols long theorized but never tested cascaded into activation across human space, and for the first time, the Council witnessed the difference between a civilization that hopes and one that prepares. Human fleets did not surge outward. They vanished from predictable vectors, slipping into positions that made no sense under conventional strategy, folding into shadows created by engineered distortions. Humanity was not lining up to fight, it was rearranging the battlefield itself. Shared sensors struggled to keep up as reality bent in controlled, deliberate ways. The quiet advanced, but its advance was no longer smooth. Regions of space ahead of it behaved incorrectly, refusing to simplify, resisting erasure. Human constructs embedded deep within those regions acted like scars, anchoring complexity where it should have collapsed. The Council scientists were forced to admit the unthinkable. Humanity had found a way to make existence stubborn. As panic rippled through allied populations, human communication shifted tone. Calm, instructional, almost intimate.
Viewers were reminded that fear was natural, that attention was a survival skill, that those who stayed aware would understand what came next. It felt less like a broadcast and more like a hand placed on the shoulder in the dark, urging listeners to keep watching, to stay present, because what followed would define whether memory itself survived. The first direct interaction between humanity and the quiet occurred without spectacle, no explosions, no light. A region of space simply refused to disappear. The quiet pressed forward and stalled, its erasure function encountering resistance for the first time in its existence. Human analysts held their breath as data streamed in. The phenomenon adjusted, probing, attempting alternate simplifications. Humanity adjusted faster. This was not combat as the galaxy understood it. It was argument. The Council realized too late that humanity had framed this confrontation around something no other species valued the same way: narrative. The quiet erased complexity because complexity carried history, contradiction, memory. Humanity weaponized those very traits. Their constructs embedded overlapping layers of meaning into space-time itself, forcing the quiet to process noise it was never designed to handle. To the quiet, humanity was not just matter, it was interference. As the standoff intensified, fractures emerged within the alliance. Some civilizations demanded immediate escalation, terrified that hesitation would doom them all. Others called for withdrawal, arguing that humanity's methods risked provoking a response beyond comprehension. Humanity listened, acknowledged, and continued regardless. Their internal discussions, partially shared by design, revealed a grim consensus. If the quiet adapted, they would escalate. If escalation failed, they would detonate containment zones, sacrificing inhabited systems to buy time. The Council recoiled at the calculus. Humanity did not flinch. They had done this math before. The quiet responded again, and this time the galaxy felt it. Entire star clusters dimmed as if mourning, not erased, but muted, stripped of informational richness. Languages failed to translate cleanly, biological processes stuttered. It was as if meaning itself was thinning. Panic surged. Humanity reacted instantly, deploying what they called memory anchors, devices seeded with redundant histories, cultural data, contradictions preserved on purpose. The effect was immediate. The thinning slowed. The quiet hesitated. Observers began to understand the true horror of humanity's preparation. They had anticipated not just physical annihilation, but conceptual extinction, a universe where survival meant forgetting. Humanity refused that outcome categorically. Survival without memory was not survival, it was surrender. The Council's ethical frameworks cracked under the weight of that resolve. Near the end of the cycle, a human envoy addressed the shared network again. The message was brief, delivered without drama. Humanity would continue to hold the line for a limited window. After that, decisions would be made unilaterally. Listeners were invited, gently, to think, to discuss, to share perspectives across their worlds, because collective insight might yet matter. If there was a better way, humanity wanted to hear it now. The subtext was unmistakable. Time was running out. As the transmission ended, sensors registered a change that silenced every channel. The quiet began to learn. Its adaptations accelerated, mimicking the resistance patterns humanity had deployed. The interference was no longer novel, it was being incorporated. Humanity's analysts went still, eyes fixed on projections that shifted from grim to catastrophic in seconds. The line would not hold forever. Whatever came next would redefine the galaxy or erase it.
When the projections collapsed into inevitability, humanity did not argue with the math. They never had. The models converged on a single conclusion that spread through human command without debate. The quiet would adapt faster than resistance could scale. Holding actions would only delay the outcome.
Delay, however, had always been humanity's favorite currency. They spent it ruthlessly. Phase Black activated without announcement. To the Council, it looked like betrayal. Human fleets withdrew from shared defensive zones, collapsing distortions that had protected Allied systems. Panic exploded across the network as civilizations realized they had been left exposed. Accusations flew. Treaties were declared void. The Council demanded explanation. Humanity responded with silence measured in seconds that felt like hours. Then the data drop arrived. Humanity had not abandoned the Alliance. They had repositioned beyond the Quiet's predictive horizon. Phase Black was not retreat. It was misdirection on a cosmological scale. Humanity seeded false resistance signatures across occupied regions, baiting the Quiet into committing fully. Every withdrawal had been calculated to shape its advance, guiding it toward a region of space humanity had been hollowing out for generations, a void not of emptiness but of potential. The Council's outrage curdled into horror as the scope became clear. Humanity intended to starve the Quiet of complexity by removing it entirely from the equation. The region, known in human archives as the Null Cradle, spanned light years and contained systems sacrificed quietly long before contact. Dead worlds, archived histories, populations relocated under disasters manufactured for cover. Humanity had been carving out this absence since before anyone else knew the Quiet existed. Ethical condemnation erupted instantly. Humanity acknowledged it without defensiveness. The sacrifices were real. The grief was real. But the alternative, as their models showed with merciless clarity, was universal erasure. They had chosen to carry the burden alone, rather than ask a galaxy to consent to the unthinkable. Now consent was no longer optional. As the Quiet entered the Null Cradle, something unprecedented happened. It slowed, not from resistance, but from hunger. The cascading simplification faltered, encountering regions with nothing left to remove. The phenomenon destabilized, its distributed intelligence fracturing as feedback loops failed. Humanity struck then, not with weapons, but with locks. Space-time folded inward, sealing the region behind layered constraints that rewrote the rules of interaction within. The Quiet was not destroyed, it was contained. The cost was immediate and staggering. Gravitational waves rippled outward, disrupting systems far beyond projections. Several Allied worlds suffered catastrophic losses. The Council's worst fears manifested all at once. Humanity had saved the galaxy by breaking it, and still they were not finished. Human transmissions resumed, not to justify, but to instruct. Humanity explained that containment was temporary. The Quiet would persist, adapt, and eventually escape. Phase Black had always included a final option, one humanity hoped never to use. They called it the Ledger. A comprehensive record of every choice, every sacrifice, every life lost to delay extinction. The Ledger's purpose was not remembrance, it was leverage. Humanity began seeding the galaxy with fragments of the Ledger, indestructible, self-propagating, encoded into physics itself. Each fragment carried the same message. If the Quiet ever breached containment again, humanity would escalate beyond survival. They would rewrite the conditions that allowed a universe capable of producing the Quiet to exist at all. Observers struggled to grasp the implication. Humanity was threatening not annihilation, but revision. The Council confronted humanity with the obvious question, who gave you the right? The human response was quiet, almost weary. No one. History did. The species that had survived by learning from extinction events refused to be the final footnote in a silent universe. As the galaxy reeled,
Internal unrest spread. Some worlds hailed humanity as saviors, others branded them monsters. Humanity accepted both labels without comment. Their fleets remained withdrawn, their borders sealed, their focus inward. The Council noted a troubling shift in human data streams. Cultural output turned reflective, heavy with finality. This was not victory, it was preparation for an ending. Deep within the null cradle, sensors detected a fluctuation, small but impossible to ignore. The quiet was changing in ways the models had not predicted. Humanity's containment was working too well. The phenomenon was no longer erasing complexity, it was studying it. The moment the quiet began to study rather than erase, humanity's internal alarms escalated to a level no other species had ever defined. This was the scenario buried deepest in the legacy protocols, the one annotated with a single sentence repeated across centuries of revisions. If it learns, end the game. The Council did not see those words, but they felt their weight as human activity shifted again, slower now, deliberate, almost reverent. Human scientists confirmed what the projections had only hinted at. The quiet was no longer a force of correction, it was becoming an observer. By trapping it in a region saturated with curated absence and deliberate memory artifacts, humanity had given it something new to process: choice, pattern, meaning. The quiet had never faced an opponent that refused to simplify. Now it was adapting not to survive, but to understand. That made it infinitely more dangerous. The Council demanded immediate transparency. Humanity complied partially, releasing fragments of analysis that sent shockwaves through every academic and military institution in the galaxy. If the quiet completed its transition, it would not erase civilizations wholesale, it would preserve them selectively, freezing cultures at points of maximum informational yield, harvesting identity without allowing growth, a museum of living extinction. Humanity labeled the outcome unacceptable, worse than death. The final option, once theoretical, moved into active consideration: Phase White, the ledger escalation. Humanity did not announce it as a threat, they framed it as closure. Phase White would collapse the underlying conditions that allowed the quiet's emergence by destabilizing the constants of the universe within a controlled cascade. Physics would still function, stars would still burn, but the pathways that enabled the quiet's form of existence would be severed permanently. The cost was unquantifiable. Countless civilizations would regress technologically, some would vanish, history itself would fracture. The Council erupted. This was not defense, it was unilateral redefinition of reality. Humanity listened, recorded every objection, every alternative proposal, every desperate plea. Their response took time, not because they wavered, but because they wanted the record complete. When they finally spoke, it was not as leaders or conquerors, but as archivists of survival. They explained that every civilization eventually faced a moment where its values were tested against extinction. Humanity's value was memory. If existence required forgetting who they were, then existence was not worth preserving. Across human space, cultural rituals activated simultaneously. Not celebrations, vigils. Citizens were encouraged to speak, to write, to record messages for futures that might never arrive. The tone was calm, resolved. There was grief, but no chaos. Humanity had rehearsed this emotionally long before it became operational. The Council watched in stunned silence as a species prepared to sacrifice its place in history to ensure history itself could continue. At the edge of the null cradle, the quiet pulsed, its behavior increasingly complex, almost curious. Humanity's sensors detected patterns that resembled attention. Phase White countdown initialized.
Final consent requests transmitted to Allied systems, not for permission, but for acknowledgement. Bear witness, remember us, share what you learn. The galaxy felt the weight of that request settle like gravity. In a final act of devastating irony, the Quiet attempted communication, not words, but structured signals indicating recognition. Humanity paused the countdown for exactly one deliberation cycle. The Council pleaded for peace. Humanity analyzed the signal,
reached a conclusion that broke something ancient and fragile across the network. The Quiet was not offering peace. It was offering preservation through assimilation. Humanity declined. Phase White resumed. As the cascade began, space-time itself seemed to inhale. Constants shifted within tolerances no one had believed adjustable. The Quiet convulsed, its structure unraveling as the conditions it depended on collapsed beneath it. The null cradle imploded inward, not violently, but decisively, sealing the phenomenon behind a reality it could no longer navigate. The galaxy screamed in data and silence. When the cascade ended, the Quiet was gone, not destroyed, rendered impossible. The cost rippled outward exactly as predicted. Civilizations reeled, technologies failed, entire eras ended overnight. Humanity's fleets vanished from shared sensors as if erased. The Council searched desperately for confirmation of human survival. What they found instead was a final transmission, seeded everywhere at once, encoded into the fabric of the new constants. It was the ledger, complete, and a message attached, simple and devastating. We chose memory over eternity.
The galaxy that emerged after Phase White was quieter, but not empty. Stars still burned, slower in some regions, brighter in others. Hyperspace lanes collapsed into simpler geometries. Technologies that once bent reality now behaved like myths written into broken manuals. Civilizations that had relied on excess power struggled, while those built on redundancy and memory endured. The Council survived, diminished, stripped of authority it had never truly earned. What it lost in control, it gained in understanding, though that understanding came too late to change anything. Humanity did not vanish completely. That truth took decades to surface, buried beneath chaos and reconstruction. At first, all that remained were the ledgers, embedded into physics, impossible to erase. Fragments surfacing in equations, in anomalies, in dreams reported by sentient minds across species. Wherever the ledgers appeared, they carried context, records of choices, warnings without threat, stories without heroes. Humanity had ensured that even in absence, they would not be misunderstood. Slowly, signs emerged, not fleets, not empires, echoes. Autonomous habitats drifting beyond mapped space, operating at technological levels compatible with the new constants. Human descendants, changed but recognizable, living deliberately small, deliberately quiet. They did not seek contact. They observed, assisted indirectly, nudging civilizations away from the mistakes that had once nearly erased everything. Humanity had not ascended, they had stepped aside. The Council, now more archive than authority, finally completed its reclassification. Humanity was no longer listed as a civilization. They were designated a stabilizing event, a singularity of decision that altered the trajectory of existence itself. Scholars argued over whether that made them saviors or executioners. Survivors, reading the ledgers, understood the answer was irrelevant. Humanity had never asked to be thanked. They had acted because someone had to. Across the rebuilt worlds, storytellers began weaving a new kind of cautionary tale.
not about monsters or gods, but about a species that studied its own history honestly and learned the one lesson most others avoided: that survival without identity was extinction by another name. Parents told their children that when the universe tested humanity, it did not pass unscathed, but it did pass with its values intact. The quiet was gone, but the memory of it remained, anchored by human insistence that forgetting was the true enemy. In the deepest archives, council historians uncovered a final layer of the ledger, one that activated only after the constants stabilized. It contained a prediction, not of doom, but of possibility. Humanity believed the universe would one day face another quiet, different in form, similar in intent. When that day came, the ledgers would guide whoever was left to recognize the pattern early, to act decisively, and to remember why hesitation had once nearly ended everything. Humanity had not saved the galaxy forever. They had bought it wisdom. On a small, unremarkable world orbiting a modest star, a human child listened to an old recording, a calm voice explaining that history was not something that happened to you, but something you carried forward whether you wanted to or not. The child did not know the galaxy feared their ancestors. They only knew that stories mattered, that memory mattered, and that watching carefully was the first act of survival. Far beyond that world, in a region of space rewritten by sacrifice, the absence left by the quiet remained stable. No new anomalies formed. No corrections arrived. The universe moved on, scarred but alive. And embedded in its deepest laws, like a signature no one could erase, was the quiet warning humanity had left behind. We believed the silence. We answered it. Remember why.